Whenever people tell me, yeah, and then in the end, just deploy the website on AWS, I'm like, wait, no. Today we're talking about continuous deployments.
Ooh, Steffen, what is it? It's your topic, huh?
Is it? It's your topic, but partly also mine, because I have written one blog post once that was published on CSS Tricks. I'm still very happy about that, and I like to tell people about it because, yeah, I was about continuous deployments for WordPress using GitHub Actions, a topic I was very excited about, but we're not using GitHub Actions for deployments typically. It was more like for me exploring this topic, and I set that up for like private projects where I didn't have a separate CI environment, and I just discovered that GitHub Actions are great for they are a free tool that you can use to enable continuous deployments for everyone, for every website. And that's pretty astonishing. But yeah, how do we do it without GitHub Actions, Dominic?
Yeah. And why don't we use GitHub Actions? But I guess like the first thing, I think most of the time when you hear about something continuous in the realm of web development, it's mostly like continuous integration, right? So where you have basically some external service or server running your tests and checking like different branches of your source code management, that those are fine, that they can be merged into master and so on. And we basically use continuous deployment most of the time, or also call it continuous deployment, because for us it's mostly about deploying current code snapshots to the production environment, I would say. And why continuous? This basically also has like the like its roots in a more like a release-based and more release-based systems where getting something to production was always like a real pain, because you had to plan everything well ahead, and then you set a date. Okay, on December 22 at 4:00 we do a deployment, and until then you have to wait and don't do anything and so on. Whereas the term continuous, and also like especially like in our context, and continuous deployment also means that kind of anyone can deploy at any time, sort of, which first of all maybe sounds scary, but if you are able to deploy every time like really quickly, and everyone is able to do that, it makes it also a lot easier to fix bugs, right? And to just deploy something new. And then if a bug happens, which you can never prevent, and you can also not prevent in a release-based, totally well planned out environment, and then you don't have scheduled like an update, then it will take much longer until bugs can be fixed. So yeah. And that's basically why externalize it and not say, okay, yeah, we can just like deploy everything from anywhere at any time. That's basically also because we want to ensure that we have like this clean state when we deploy or when we build something, and that not like local maybe misconfigurations of development environments or things that people have on their machine that are not shared with anyone else, that it doesn't happen, that these things differ, and thus two people would just deploy like different versions maybe, or like have like some different configurations or whatever when they do deployments. So that's why we say, okay, we have a single source of truth. The source of truth is our source code management. And we have like one server that for us, we have a build process that basically installs npm packages, composer, like PHP composer packages, runs our build process, and then deploys things to production, or the files like the files from the source code management and the artifacts that you produce by installing dependencies and running the build process. And that's basically it. And in most of the times, in like 99% of all of our projects, the deployment then, like pushing those artifacts to the production server, is actually done via rsync or like SSH, where we basically just log into the production server and, for example, like upload all of the stuff into a specific file, and then change like the do sort of like atomic deployments, it's what they're called. So just change the theme folder from the newly created folder, or put the newly created folder in the place where the actual production folder is, and then the theme will be live. When we used Bedrock, it was a little bit more involved, because like the entire environment or the entire app, including WordPress and all of the plugins, were every time we did a deployment also deployed. And then we had like a releases folder, a current folder, and like symlinked basically the current, like the last uploaded release to the current folder, which also made it easy to do rollbacks in case anything went wrong. Yeah, that is more about like the theory or what is being done. And for that, we we use a tool called Buddy. Buddy.works is the URL. And we are really happy with it, to be honest. And this is also why we haven't used GitHub Actions more, or something similar. Also, it's one of the main, or like the main benefits of getting up to speed, like of creating or making changes to the deployment process, is that it has a nice UI, and you can basically do everything via the UI. Like, you don't need to create a workflow YAML file, or you can, like, there's also like a configuration of Buddy via a YAML file. But we most of the time actually use the UI-based approach.
That's an interesting thing to hear from you. This is like, I didn't expect that as being one of the primary arguments from your side.
No, the reason for that is actually that, especially in deployments, things can go wrong very often at the beginning when figuring out things. And I always hate it when you have to do a new commit, push it again, wait for it to happen, do this, trial and error. Like, you don't, like, it's also with code, you can just have a stupid like formatting issue or whatever. Of course, there are plugins for your IDE, but it's like all a bit more cumbersome, and using a nice UI to just click together these things and make, I mean, you could still export the configuration in the end, but I actually also like being able to change the config via the UI without having to change something in the repo, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I remember working with GitHub Actions. It's been like quite some time ago already. Maybe they changed that. But when I worked with that, I actually had to, like, the configuration works through a dot file, a workflow file, a YAML that you create. And there you define like all the steps that need to be taken and how to access the server and the rsync command and so on. And I had to commit that file to the repo, and even to test things out, I had to create a commit and upload that commit to GitHub, and then it would run. And this is like felt like a very tedious process where I rather wanted to quickly try out things. Like once everything works, it's great. But if something breaks, or if you want to figure things out, or sometimes in a deployment step, maybe you have multiple steps and you want to just like pause one part of that or change one part of that, right? Or you don't need to do that and only need to run the deployment and not the build process again. I don't know. And that's where a nice UI certainly helps a lot. However, I also like a lot that at least not everyone has access to that, like needs access to that to deploy. Like I think many deployment workflows work in a way that only specific people can deploy, and then they use the CI tool, and there is a deploy button, and that needs to happen manually. And we had it also when we were using Jenkins, but I think we also had the automation there. But I remember that from Jenkins also, these manual steps of build and deploy. And usually we just use a trigger depending on a branch in Git, right, on GitHub. So that we use a production branch, and then you merge or you push the master branch to the production branch. And then this will trigger automatically deployment. So everyone who has access to that can deploy to production server without needing access to the production server, because in terms of security and data privacy, you also want to make sure that not everyone has just access directly to the production server, but still can deploy things there. And that's great. And then only certain DevOps people have direct access to the production servers to debug things there directly. And you can still manage then still access to who can deploy to production, because you can also lock branches, right? Or what is it called?
Protect the branch.
Protect branches.
Yes.
So you might need like to create a pull request that needs confirmation from someone else to merge to a certain branch, and then it will deploy.
Yeah. So well, coming back to this GitHub, like you still have in GitHub with GitHub Actions to do one request per, like if you want to change, not one request, one commit to change something, right? What I found useful most of the time, I do this inside of the GitHub IDE, kind of like edit files there directly, because I think this is also a nice experience nowadays. They have made some great improvements to the in-browser editor and so on. So this is actually quite nice. But yeah, I mean, this UI thing is like more of a cosmetic reason also for using a Buddy instead of GitHub Actions. But there are like other things that are for me a lot more relevant. And one is the speed. Like Buddy can cache or caches your artifacts a lot better than GitHub does. Of course, you can also do that in GitHub and create your own caches, and we've done that so to speed it up quite a lot. But still, I feel like the computing power, or also like startup times of individual jobs or actions inside of a pipeline are a lot faster. Then when something fails in GitHub, you always have to do a new commit to fix it, right? And in Buddy, you can actually now also just debug the container that stuff was executed in inside the browser and make changes to the action, and then run it again just from that position, because every action is cached, or the result of every action is cached. So there are like just like a lot of like niceties that you have that make it easier to deal with individual pipelines, jobs, executions, and so on. So yeah, I must say that we've tried a lot in the recent years. As you mentioned briefly, we also had our own Jenkins server running that we managed ourselves, and this so far has been like the best and easiest experience, I must say.
It's very interesting, the points that you just highlighted, because I just went to their website, and that's kind of what they also tend to focus on in their marketing and their storyline. They say right now, the easiest CI/CD ever. Buddy is the most effective way to build better apps faster. 87% faster CI/CD adoption by teams. Even the most complicated workflows take minutes to create, and 12 seconds of average deployment time. Smart changes, detection, state-of-the-art caching, parallelism, and so on. Make Buddy the fastest. So yeah, it's not like we're the most powerful, we can do everything. Of course, they have a lot of integrations, but they really focus on it's easy, it's fast. And yeah, that's great, because yeah, for us typically it's it's not one of those things that we tend to you tend to enjoy most in terms of being the most important or impactful thing on a project. It's something we want it to work, and we want it to be reliable. We want it to be quick and a nice helpful thing and nice helpful tool. So that's a good match there.
Yeah.
What about other deployment strategies than using SSH and rsync, which basically just like copies files, right? We have, the atomic deployments where you create separate release folders and link to it. Many times these days for websites, we just like directly rsync, like copy over new file changes to a website, because for many websites, it's just like much quicker and more effective. But we also have done things differently. How?
Yes.
What other options come to your mind?
Like the most asked for option is, or like in terms of like second place, right? So the second most asked for option is Docker. Like, can you build a Docker image with this for us, right? So we've done this a lot of the time, like many times before, and we have been doing this for quite a while, but I always discourage clients from doing that, to be honest, because it adds like a lot of complexity. Also, we always advise people to use like managed hosting, right? We also don't we also offer managed hosting where we have people or like a partner that takes care of the servers and only does that. Like it's the only thing they do is being experts at hosting and configuring machines and making sure that everything runs smoothly. And I think the minute that Docker was introduced and like more like DevOps became a bit more popular and so on, it was like, okay, now the developer can take care of all this hosting stuff. And you just provide a Docker like runner kind of, either Docker Swarm, Kubernetes, maybe just a Docker Compose thing on a virtual machine or something. And then the developer can decide what software to use, what services to use, and configure them and so on. But I think like for production, I always have a hard time thinking that this is a good idea, because there's a lot more than just like downloading a Docker image and making it run with Docker Compose to make things secure and up to date in production, right? So even like if your code doesn't change, like you and like this always then some people might think that, okay, if once I have a running image, I don't need to change anything anymore, right? But this is then inside of the container, you have like a running operating system that might have vulnerabilities because of like outdated packages that were used. So you actually, although your code hasn't changed, you still might need to rebuild the image and like deploy a new container to production and so and I think a lot of people don't know about this complexity or like handle it maybe not as professionally as I think it should be handled. So yeah, but in general, what I do like is like the about this approach and also about Docker is that once you've built a container or an image, you can then just like put it into a repository somewhere, and you can have like the whole deployment orchestrated in a much more like scalable way, right? Yeah. So if you have a heavy or a website that needs to scale a lot, right? So where you have a lot of like high traffic phases, but also low traffic phases, and you want to optimize like the use resources and so on, this can definitely be an approach that is that makes sense and that you should go.
Yeah, but like also supporting that view, like I just am such a big fan of managed hosting, just for the reasons you just mentioned. It's great to know there's someone with expertise taking care of these things, taking care of these updates, but also knowing when not to update something, right? You also need to know these technologies. Like, is it safe to update MySQL from that version to that version, or is there a major breaking change, or is something like a critical change that needs to be, or a fix that needs to be implemented right away, or do we need to wait for it? Are there any dependencies? How are you supposed to know about all these? Well, you need to take care of it, right? And if you don't, you might risk like your security, or you might also risk just like the stability of your site, and things might break and so on. And yeah. Whenever people tell me, yeah, and then in the end, just deploy the website on AWS. I'm like, wait, no. I think by default, this should be the default. Maybe this is coming from more from the startup world where people are running their apps on AWS, but they have one app and they have maybe a team of DevOps people taking care of that, so on. But I hope no one really just like deploys something somewhere in AWS and then forgets about it and keeps it running there without maintenance. On top of that, AWS is so complicated.
Yes.
I just remember last time I tried to log into AWS. This was like giving me days of headache because they messed up my main account, and I had basically two accounts with the same email address, which shouldn't work. And then I had to add a second mobile phone number just to verify it and merge it and create and so on. And after I was able to log in, I was trying to go into the settings and understand and find my S3 buckets and access, how to manage access, like even the access management stuff of AWS. To a front-end developer saying like that, it's a nightmare. To someone who doesn't work with it every day, I have no clue how to do that. So I can't stress enough like how big, again, I'm a fan of managed hosting, where I know I don't have to take care of it, not just because I don't like taking care of it, but because I know they're professionals taking care of security and stability. And our preferred hoster, I think we can talk about that, is a German one, All-Inkl they are called. We've been working with them now for actually 15 years. I think it's been more than 15 years since I created my first account with them. And they're not one of those large, well-known ones, but they're so consistent and delivering service, 24/7 support and in security and so on. Like I've literally had like already like 10 years ago, I've had websites for clients hosted on different hosters for international reasons. And that one website was Joomla back in the days. It got hacked on multiple hosters, but never on this one, because they have extra measures to block traffic and so on. It's not just the software, but also the infrastructure on what you do to secure sites from a server-side point of view and so on. So, yes, people, yeah.
I'm just sorry, I'm laughing because I think like they are so consistent that even their web design hasn't changed in the last 15 years.
That's so true. It's like their website. I think it didn't change in the past 15 years. Like, yeah.
This is sometimes a problem with clients, right? Because it looks like they are,
is it? No. Is their website?
No, they have a separate mobile website.
Oh, right. And yeah. But again, like I'm their biggest fans, and there's so many. I don't want to like now call out names, but we've been working with so many hosting companies, specifically those in Germany, and I don't remember a single one where we did not have significant issues at some point that we never had with All-Inkl.
Yeah, that is true.
Maybe in customer support, in missing packages, in security, in managing access, and there are just various things that always tend to go wrong with others. And yeah, then people sometimes approach us and it's like, hey, I just give you my access detail, just figure it out. And then it's like, oh, it's that one hoster again. No, damn it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the most significant reason, if not almost the only one, why we started offering hosting, although we didn't want to do at some point, because we said we have to take more responsibility also to make it easier for ourselves to set up. And now I'm circling back, I'm talking a lot about hosting now, but to make it easy to create also the deployment process, the initial deployments for websites. And it's much, much more easy if we know that there won't be issues with the environment. It's not even about specific requirements, but just like being sure, being safe that there won't be issues that we run into that we need to figure out with the infrastructure.
Yeah. And I think we were coming here from deployment methods, right? So I don't know if there's any other way that was lately requested. I mean, oh no, yes, just one more. So sometimes the client wants to deploy via a GitHub repo, right? So basically wants to do this, wants to check out the repo on a server and just so that then you basically deploy instantly and can go back in history and so on. And while for some technologies, this is not the best idea. Like with WordPress themes or WordPress itself, it does work. And then what we usually do, because in our Git repository, we don't have like the dependencies or the build artifacts, right? So what we then do on the build server, or the continuous deployment server, we build all of the artifacts and then copy the files to a new repo and make a commit and push that then to the origin. So yeah, this is
what would go in there though. Like, is it then also only the code, or are you also talking about like deploying content database as
no? Usually it's just then the theme actually. So we build a theme, put the theme in a new repo with like all the bundled assets, JavaScript, CSS, the optimized images or whatever, but not the uploaded images, but optimized images from our repo, and the composer packages or like PHP packages. And of course, like the node modules don't need to go in there. The node modules in the theme are only used for building, not for serving then in the end the code.
Okay, and then you only have the release history kind of in a separate repo, yeah. I'm just thinking you could also kind of have something like that if you were using like versions and tags, right? We did in the beginnings, I think, of deployments, we always like created releases and so on, but more like for kind of app-like websites, project management system that we developed and other types of apps. For a regular website, I don't feel like real in-depth versioning is really helpful, like to version every single deploy that you make.
I mean, it could make sense for versioning the deployment, but then I think you should totally get away from like Semver or like semantic versioning or anything. Then it would just be, this is version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, and so on, have a counter. Like this is just deploy number X. Because when you start wanting to version, like semantically version a website or a theme, like it,
that's what I meant, kind of. Then you quickly end up at version 238.12.69
or at 1.0.240, you know, like
or like that, like depending on how you treat then those things. 1.249.86. Well, yeah, you could have it, but it's like, what's the meaning really of that? Like, how much meaning does it really add? And who you need to make better release management then, like who defines what is now a new release and feature and what goes in there, and how do you keep track of it? And then you just like basically, if different people aren't doing that, then you just need to look at the latest version and make the choice for yourself. But then you could just, like, as you said, like count up. And that could be nice, right? Like a tag still has some kind of tag or version number, like the commit hash, right? Short hash, but it's hard to read, right? That could be nice if it would be just counting up the deployments.
Yeah, but you get that from Buddy, kind of, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a deploy number or run number, but of course this is not a new Git repo, so
that would be nice. Like, doesn't GitHub support deployments as a feature, like that also in terms of tagging? Couldn't that just be synced? That maybe Buddy reports back to GitHub what deployment this was. Yeah. If there's an easy way to do that, let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, I think that also wraps it up, huh?
Yep.